Hi, this is Paula Gloria, and this show is called Farther Down the Rabbit Hole. The reason it's called Farther Down the Rabbit Hole is because we go into topics far more deeply and we face areas that usually people are not comfortable to face. And so today's topic is going to be about breast cancer. This is something that's very much a reality in many, many people's lives. And yet this is also an area, because of the nature of the social consensus and the social approval, oftentimes we will allow our body to be the brunt of lack of information. So, along these lines, I'd like to introduce the hat that I'm wearing. It's called kabuki. It's a handmade hat, and it comes from the shop where I'm working now, which is the Village Scandal on 7th Street in the East Village. That's where 3rd Avenue runs along, and then Cooper Union. And it's a wonderful handmade hat. I think it runs about $40, and it comes from New Orleans. You can hurry down and get one, except that there's only one. There's many one-of-a-kind hats, and I think I'm growing very attached to it. The reason that I want to wear it for this show in particular, besides wearing red for breast cancer, even though Scott Goldberg is always telling me, Paula, don't wear red because it bleeds on the film, but for today it's appropriate. In any case, the reason I wanted to wear these earrings and this hat is because I want to introduce the concept to you of Agori. Agori is a concept of achieving divine connection by going outside of social convention. And in India, the Agoris are often looked down upon by mainstream society because they tend to hang out at cemeteries and the burning ghats. But the reason they do this is because it's a practice where you're constantly being reminded of death. You're constantly being reminded that we are here for a very short time and that there's a promise for something great that we can achieve in this lifetime, which is a connection with the divine. And we're reminded even in our tradition with the sacrifice of Abraham. Abraham so much wanted to have a connection with God, with divinity, that he was willing to sacrifice his dear son Isaac. He went up the mountain, and this was his full intention to do so. Now we can say, oh, well, you know, an angel took the knife out of his hand, or he substituted a ram. But the point is he was willing to go to that length. So when it comes to Agori practices, or people who would hang out around cemeteries in order to achieve a divine connection, I think we should pay careful attention about how important it is to have that divine connection, and even if it's somewhat filtered through those that we don't approve of or society doesn't seem to be approving of, at the end of the day, it is this divine energy that's allowing the society to stay together. But for today, I want to talk to you about a personal journey that I've had with the whole mammogram situation in 2005, and then another one that was done in 2006. What I had tried to do was to see if I could get a doctor to just simply take my camera, point it at the white screen, and then have him give his diagnosis, because I simply could not fathom what relationship calcium deposits had to do with cancer. What was the pathology, you know? And I figured if I could put it up on YouTube, I could achieve, you know, more feedback on it. You know, you could say a review of peers, my peers, people who are like me, faced with this kind of decision. So I went through quite a rigmarole. I eventually got a letter from a doctor, because the administrators, when they saw how sincere I was, they were helping me get the numbers, because the doctor declined to do it. I said, look, say exactly what you're supposed to say, as if you were saying it to me, and you won't even be on camera. You'll be off camera. I'm going to be pointing it at the mammograms, you know, on the white screen. And I know a lot of people are shy and so on, but still, you know, no go. So at first I was corresponding with lawyers, and finally I got a letter from a doctor. And my feeling about getting a letter from a doctor is that I simply wanted an educated guess, right? You know, when you want something to be done, whether it's fixing your car or maybe some legal advice, you want to kind of have an idea of what you're in for. You know, if it's going to be a protracted lawsuit or if it's something that could be quickly resolved out of court, you know, whatever the deal is. So how much more so do you want to have an idea of the lay of the land when it deals with your body? Because even though they were saying, no big deal, we're only going to take out spaghetti-sized strands of your breast. Well, you know, given the size of my breast, this was considerable. So before I had somebody doing core samples on my breasts, I wanted to make sure that this was something I really wanted to do. And part of that process is I really, really trust the review process. And since then, I'm even more committed to this procedure of peer review, because when I put things up on YouTube, if I'm completely full of it and if I'm off base, I'm so happy to be corrected, to be pointed to another video that will give some more information. It's a very, the internet is a place where you can learn things really rapidly. It's a very valuable tool, but let me tell you, there's a lot of mischief on it, and I'll be showing you that shortly. But for right now, here's the picture of my mammograms that unfortunately I had to put up just on my own window, looking out over the Union Square clock tower. And here's my letter that I finally got from a doctor. Dear Ms. Tsakuma, your letter to Alan D. Avelis, president of New York City Health and Hospitals Corporation, and keep in mind, when we're talking about traditional medicine, because I'm going to talk about that later, think what's happening when you're dealing with people who are sort of beholden to corporate rules, as opposed to, if corporate comes from the Latin word that has to do with body, it's the human body that I'm concerned with. Anyway, it goes, it's been referred to me for a response. I'm delighted to learn that you are pleased with the services and support provided by Grosvenor Healthcare Services. So in other words, I didn't have to pay for this health care, but I was still very concerned about whether this was something I wanted to do. Ultimately, I do feel that they do need to have health care for everyone, because if the regime is not a good regime, it's going to mean that the rich people are going to be dying off and the poor people who can't afford this therapy are going to be flourishing. So I think you have to be careful and take a good look at what free health care is all about. You may be getting exactly what the rich people are getting, but the rich people may not be getting what they should be getting in the first place. Unfortunately, we are declining your request to have your medical appointment videotaped. Based on my review of your request and in consultation with the physicians at Grosvenor, it is our belief that the presence of a video camera will adversely change the dynamics of the parent-doctor relationship. We further believe that videotaping would create an artificial environment that may have a chilling effect upon the quality and the dynamics of the patient-physician communication. So, what I want to do now is first of all say that the doctor-patient relationship is sacred. I would never want to get involved with that dynamic. Never, ever, ever. And I want to give you an idea, though, of traditional knowledge that has not been allowed to flourish. They haven't allowed it to flourish because I believe it doesn't serve the agenda of something that's sort of machine-like. But by the same token, I want to nip at the bud any feeling that machines are the enemy. And I'm very pro-technology. Technology can help us have an easier life, but we need to understand what is the nature of our consciousness, and where does our consciousness end, and where does the consciousness of the other begin. Ultimately, I feel that consciousness is everywhere. That means everything has consciousness. Even a rock has a nervous system if we only understood that nervous system. So what I'm going to do first is go into a videotape that you may have seen before, but I don't think you can see it too much, and that is of how there's a more traditional approach to cancer. This is not to say that all types of cancer are the same, but you will get a feeling of a body of knowledge, the Vedic tradition, where doctors learned their knowledge from their fathers, who learned from their fathers before them and before them and before them. So the idea is that as humanity evolves and advances, it can start to hand down the best of what it's gained from one generation to another. So let's take a look. Here we go. Now I'm going to just talk you through this because I've disabled the sound. This shows that they collect the herbs respectfully. They wash them in the natural water, hopefully that hasn't had toxins spilled in. Here we have the process of pulse diagnosis. And this is one very powerful method of determining what's going on in the body. When I was in India in 1980 with Maharishi Mahesh Yogi in New Delhi, that's about the time Deepak Chopra was coming on the scene, I had the great good fortune to be the patient of Brihaspati Triguna. Subsequent to 1980, I mean, he was able to take a cough just right on a dime and turn it around. It was very impressive. And people were very sick because we were packed into rather unsanitary conditions. So it's amazing, wherever the need is, nature can rise up and restore that need. Here was a doctor who, with some, who knows what, a few little herbs that were wrapped up in newspaper, tremendous results were achieved. Not only did my cough go away, chronic stomach ache that I had was gone, and in its place was like this feeling of bliss and well-being. I mean, I was a believer from day one. Subsequent to that, as the Transcendental Meditation movement sort of gained in momentum and pushing this natural form of medicine, although Maharishi said it existed in all cultures, so this is not just exclusive to Indian knowledge, a nature-based alignment with our health, so that our body follows the cycles of nature. There was an article in a London newspaper, and I tried to find it from the family when I went back to New Delhi, but this Ayurvedic family, doesn't keep track of such things, saying that the diagnosis that he was able to do is far more accurate than any of the machines and the Western methods were to figure out what was going on. In India, the powerful people, the rich people, the politicians would go to this great siddha. It means a master who has, developed abilities to understand what's happening with the body, and actually with all of creation. We might know it as remote viewing. Rich people, progressive people in India, the well-born people, the politicians, they would go to him for a diagnosis, and then they would take the antibiotics and the other methods. So, India's a mixed bag. But let's carry on with this Ayurvedic doctor from the south of India. And he's a Brahmin. Again, he's learned from his father, who's learned before him. This is the value of the caste system, the upside. He's feeling the muscle tone of her hand, the flexibility in the palm and the fingers. And all of this, her eyes, whether they're bloodshot or whatever, how's the tongue doing? All of this gives him an idea of what's going on inside. And, so you don't have to do these invasive diagnostic methods. This is very important. But again, look at his darker skin. I think it's a lot of it has to do with racism, why we sort of allow for our so-called modern healthcare to keep ignoring these very valuable discoveries that have been made since ancient times. I call it racism. I mean, there's many different reasons. There's also when healthcare becomes beholden to shareholders. This shows how ancient it is, the pulse diagnosis. And here he is saying that she's suffering from cancer, and she says she's feeling better and it's going to be cured completely. He says the disease is called putu. So you have a feeling this is very known. I think later on in the tape he says there's about 20 different kinds. He says in allopathy it's called cancer. Now I'm going to pause at this point and say, now you might be astonished, how can somebody who's so primitive be having a cure for cancer? How can there even be such a thing as a cure for cancer? We're touting the fact that we're making headway, but what I'm claiming is that maybe a lot of the headway that we're making is because we're not diagnosing people properly. Maybe there was never anything wrong with them in the first place. Again, I'm not even beginning to try to diagnose what your situation is. Don't be emailing me for tips about cancer care, because I'm not a doctor. I don't pretend to be. I'm just saying, let's take a look at what's going on here, and let's try to be very, very careful when we sort of steer our course through life, because certainly by the time we've gotten so out of balance that we're beholden to people who may be very well-meaning, but they've sort of had intelligence co-opted from them. If you have medical schools who are funded, again by corporations whose interest is the bottom line, it may well be that they never even had a chance to get the right information. And when it comes to shock, well, let me take you on to YouTube now. We're going to see an encounter that I had with what may be a machine or spam. And this was 14 emails that came in my box very rapidly because I was answering them very rapidly, until finally a person actually called me up. This will give you an idea. Right here, the first one I got was breast cancer. It was in my inbox. I went over, I took a look at the website, and I was astonished. This is a woman, supposedly, who posted her mastectomy. And I can't show it to you because on Manhattan Neighborhood Network we can't show images of blood. So you can't be seeing what this is all about. But I'm very suspicious that this is a real website with a real person. It may be a few human beings who are put together along with a sophisticated spamming and marketing thing to have that semblance. I noticed that she subscribed to my channel, but when you go onto her site, I don't see where her subscriptions are. Now the whole point of YouTube is to create a community of people who will comment on videos. Now, the search engines cannot go into videos, but the search engines can go into text, and they can make very sophisticated predictions about how to answer according to whatever your agenda might be. So if the agenda is get as many women as possible to go along with the mainstream, then to be on something like YouTube is very valuable and very important marketing scheme. There are a lot of corporations, quote-unquote machines, whatever you want to call it. Again, I don't take that man-machine dichotomy. I believe that consciousness is everywhere, but until we unfold our full potential, we won't know how to turn technology into a valuable resource and asset. And also, even when it comes to traditional methods, we can take what's been learned in the past and clone it with our great technology so that we can really advance and we can, move on to the next level. So here he is finally giving her herbs, and here comes my favorite part where as he's writing it up and telling her how to take it, at what time of day and so on, because cycles, see, he prays over it. So to me, what that says is when you're desperately out of balance and you're hurting and you're in pain and you need to go to somebody, you have to give them your power to be able to have your balance restored. And so if a doctor has this kind of psychic energy coming at him, he's going to grow out of balance unless he knows profoundly how to balance himself. One of the most important ways to balance yourself is humility. And so the idea of taking what he's going to be giving her and reminding himself, perhaps thinking about his fathers, his ancestors before him, thinking about his civilization, his culture, and wanting to do justice to it, that helps him restore balance. So you can keep the whole process continuing on. However, when you move down here into YouTube and you see, so there we go. First of all, she doesn't have me in her subscriptions. She doesn't have any subscriptions up. So this begins to look like something that pretends to be part of the YouTube community, but doesn't have that two-way quality to it. Again, the search engines can go into the text. So all of the text that I wrote, because you're going to see me later on, I'll take you into the site, firing away a lot of responses because I'm beginning to question what's really happening here. But the search engines cannot go into the videos. Needless to say, yours truly, Paula Gloria, from farther down the rabbit hole, sent one of my typical humzingers. It was called Chemotherapy and the Sacrifice of Abraham. You know, it's only 7 minutes long, and I figured, you know, I'm going to get a response from this. I'm not against chemotherapy, but I am saying let's understand why these things work. So let's go back into the responses to me, and we're going to see, here's the part on breast cancer. And so I responded to her, then a couple others come there. This guy's about Alexander work. He's even thinking that's controversial. Everything can be controversial on YouTube, but as my dad said, controversy is a good thing. I'm going to zoom in more. And now here it starts a quick barrage, starting with, let's see if I can get you over here to see. You'll notice the times. They'll put the time over here of when these came in, and this starts off at 2:33 p.m. and then it will go for a while until a person actually called me up. But the person, again, I don't know, really matches with all of these stories. So my communication as of yesterday ended when I asked if she would be on my TV show. Because I think at a certain point you can take all these links, because I haven't even begun to follow it all up, because I'm a human being, I can't keep up with a machine. But I can certainly learn how to dip into my highest truth, and how when I do have a human being on the telephone to indicate, hey, as human beings we're all in this together, and the sooner we learn to create connections of empathy versus animosity, the better off we're going to be. If the person who called me up is somebody very sophisticated about, well, I mean, mind control sounds like a blow beneath the belt, but she was definitely smart and savvy, and she knew when to cry and all the right things to say. But I'm sure she was a human being. She still has real breasts, even if they're not the breasts that are posted here. I think, you know, we can work together so we can see that when we all have to face these kinds of decisions, that we make the best possible decisions. So I, you know, questioned it, and then I got this answer that said, gee, sorry if you do not believe who I am. And then she goes on and starts to respond, because I felt the best way to deal with this is to send her a video. She goes, I understand what you mean. I guess I just didn't have time to look at all the angles. She was diagnosed, and it was pressure, pressure, pressure. She was scared. And I got 2 of these, one at 3:06 and one at 3:07. And then finally I'm getting kind of frustrated, because at one time she said that I'm very busy, and then another time she'll talk about, later on she'll say I'm a respected woman. See, I got right into it about the machine. Then Molly, my great friend who has the Society for Prevention of Cruelty to Inanimate Objects, was horrified at my energy, so I sent another one and I said, please excuse me if you really are a machine, but I gave her another chance, sent a video attached, and wanted a response from it. And she said, I did have human breasts. Oh, incidentally, I must say, at the very beginning, I think she signed herself as Shay Boobless. And she goes, but I'm still smiling. And that reminded me of a time when I was talking to an oncologist, and at first she could hear my little wimpy voice, and she said, oh, you know, come down. And she was the sister of a good friend. And she said, you know, come down, it's not that big a deal, you know, come down, I do boobs, you know. And I thought, well, you know, that's a certain bedside manner. But, you know, it's nice to be relaxed and comfortable and easy, but at the same time, this is a very serious topic. So pretty soon she could see, as wimpy and soft as my voice was, I wasn't budging on that kind of an invitation. So then she kind of had to pull out of her bag of tricks another strategy, and that was, don't wait until it gets bloody and drippy. To which I answered, you know, by this time I can kind of get my energy, I've kind of got my bearings, you know, thanks to all my cranky callers. when I used to have a live call-in show. And I said, well, how long does it take before it gets bloody and drippy? A month, weeks, And then she answers back and she goes, well, with breast cancer, it's never weeks and months, it's always years. So that's a red flag, Red is the order of the day here today. So she goes, I did have a human breast, my dear. I guess, machines have analyzed what our response is when we hear things like my dear. And later on she says, I've watched the video and I can see that you're a respected woman. Well, she clearly didn't see a video that I sent, because that is the last comment I have ever gotten on YouTube, that I'm a respected woman. First of all, I don't really care about that, but I can begin to see from a machine's point of view how they would analyze some very sincere, perhaps even medical doctor who's starting to wake up and smell the coffee and realize what's going on, saying, I've got this degree from Harvard and this degree from here and there. So he gets that kind of response. But, that alerted me to the fact that as much as I was freaking out, because look at, I was freaking out, right? If you got this and somebody thought you were a machine, wouldn't you take 7 minutes, particularly if it's about breast cancer, and, put some attention on it? Well, that's what I tried to do. I can't believe it. I'm almost out of time. So anyway, this went on and on and on. And finally, oh, look at this just to cheer you up. I got one from India. And look at this. This is so Indian. Keep up the good work, sir. I love you. Thanks for mailing me. Actually, that happened to me when I got my cellular telephone license, and I was at a boardroom in trying to negotiate with our license in Kentucky. And I remember the person who was trying to impress me and get my license, hopefully he could get it out of petty cash, which would be up to $20 million. This was at Bell South. And I remember he slipped and called me sir. So I was either called sir or hun. When it came to getting the coffee, the knee-jerk reaction was look to the woman. But what I'm saying right now, this has been an excursion farther down the rabbit hole, and I want to see if we can take that feminine energy, pull it in, and try to create truly new realities. Let's face the horror and enjoy the cure. And this is Kali. She's the most horrific expression of the Divine Mother, but she's also the most powerful. And I would say right now, farther down the rabbit hole is going to take you to the power that you need for the healing that you want. Thanks for joining me. I'm Paula Gloria.